I want you to get together.
Yeah, it's, you know, here's the crazy. I'll tell you this because this is pretty cool. So I was watching that Fallout show again, and I was like preparing for the stream last night. And so, did you play the video game?
I played pretty much all the video games except the latest one. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so in the show, I was saying I was really starting to kind of like, now that I had time to think about it, getting the more meta view of it. So you have two protagonists. You have Lucy, again, like Lucy Lucifer, but she's in the vault, right? So she's down in the earth. Like, so you have this protagonist, and then you have Maximus, who's up on the surface of the earth. These are kind of your, you know, your people who are your protagonists are like who we would see the world. This would be like us. Like, they're both being lied to, but in different ways. And obviously, the guy on the surface of the earth only knows the apocalypse, and the person in the vault only knows what she's been taught about what's going to be on the surface of the earth. So he doesn't know that much, and she's been lied to about everything. And so she thinks she's going to go up at some point, or the people in the vault are going to repopulate the earth. And so there's a very crazy scene in there, and I was like, to the short season, man, it was like, was so epic. So she didn't know that they already tried to repopulate the earth, or they did, and then the bombs fell again. And then so there's this scene where they go over, I guess there's this town in California where it's like Shady Acres or something like that. I'm not sure if that's what it was called in the game, but she, like, they're talking, and she realizes we missed it. And I was like, so she thought they were going to, you know, that's obviously what the drive was for them to do all the things they were doing, stay in shape, do all the things, learning to plant crops and do all the stuff in order to repopulate the earth. And this is what kept them going. And then she realized, wait a minute, that already happened. Almost like a light bulb, little season. Like, was this potentially showing somebody, like, hoping for the millennial reign one day? Wait a minute, that already happened. It's already gone. And now the only thing that's left is a giant hole in the ground. It's all been bombed out. And you're like, hello, is that kind of like, is that maybe like the mud flood right there? It's like that, wait a minute, they already did the millennial reign, and now it's all destroyed. You know, now there's mud everywhere. It's a giant mess. I'm like, that made a lot of sense to me.
So what is she then? Is she the rest of the dead who got resurrected after all of it and came out from the vaults into the ruins of the millennial reign, which was the population attempt? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think it's like, I mean, so you have, I mean, obviously it's like two classes of people. So, like, again, the Maximus is he was not of means, right? Because he lived in this mess. And then anybody in the vault would have had means, which to me, I don't know if this is I mean, I'm of the belief that I believe that we are not resurrected. We were somehow like children of people who survived through all the stuff.
Yeah.
And we weren't taught about it. But I think it almost seems like, to me, like the vault class of people is the aristocrats. They would have the one been coming up. It's almost like, even the way it's kind of presented in like some of the pictures and stuff, it's almost like got their top hats and their nice clothes, and they're kind of just observing this place. Pretty nice buildings out here. Almost like that they had nothing to do with this, but they were kind of almost like everybody looks like they're tourists.
Yeah,
in the cities.
Those old photos are pretty wild. Well,
they're just check.
So what always gets me about those old photos is that you see them in like wearing literally like their Sunday best. They look amazing. All the women wearing corsets. They've got the canes and the fluffy hats, and the men are all wearing the top hats and the suits. You know, and then you always at the same time you get photos from this period of children slaving away in mines and like in factories, looming things, like sweeping chimneys, and it's kind of like, what was going on there? That was odd. Like, where are the adults working in these factories? Or why was child labour such a huge thing exactly? Like, it's all, when you actually really think about that in context, it's strange. It's very strange. That
well, it only makes sense. It only make the orphan trains really only make sense in the context of this. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, again, well, unless there was some other cataclysm they're not telling us about that's not related to this. But I mean, I think that to me is, it seems really obvious because again, as somebody who's in business, I don't want kids doing the job we're doing, not because I'm just the nicest guy. It's because these kids are obviously not going to do a great job. And obviously they got to take care of all these, like, who's in charge of the kids?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like using kids for physical labor is like, especially working those factories where like you could see the pictures. They're not even big enough to operate the machines.
Mm-hmm.
They're not big enough to do all the real jobs. And it's like, that's the thing. It's funny. Like, even when you get into like building the pyramids and building different buildings, and it's like, they'll just tell you, oh, they just had a lot of people. You know what happens when you have a lot of people? You have to have good people to manage lots of people. Like, you have to imagine if they were all kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, imagine who's in charge of the kids. Like, that's not something you would do. And I mean, I know that there's obviously people like still in today, sweatshops and all that kind of stuff. But point is, like, we're not taught that America was like that, right? That we would treat kids like that. You know, again, so you're lying to us in one way or the other. But to me, again, I always said it makes sense that the people wearing those top hats, they ain't working in a factory. They're not picking cotton. They're not doing any of that kind of work.
No.
So,
well, one wild speculation here is if these are the children of the parents who lived through the millennial reign, let's say, and we know that people who lived during the millennial reign probably lived longer, had not a different physiology to us, but more longevity than we had, perhaps in some way. Could it be that these kids are not really kids by our standards today? Are they like 30 years old, but they still look like children because they age slower, because they are the remnants of the direct descendants of those who have just come out of the millennial reign, perhaps? Just a wild theory there, and
possibly, but I think it's just more. I think it's more likely that maybe the parents live longer.
Yeah,
because I think that we're talking about like the orphan trains would have been post. You know, those kids would have been born definitely afterwards, and I think was all that tech dismantled, like, you know, the kind of tech like whatever the healing tech would have been. That's another interesting thing about Fallout is they have the ghoul, and he's what, like 250 years old? I don't know, 200. You know, he's well over 200 years old, and I think maybe that is something too. That some of these people could live longer because of all the stuff.
It's funny because in the game universe, there's a cult of Atom. Okay. And it sounds like Adam, or, you know, this idea. Okay, so anyway, it's this. They're obsessed with the nuclear energy and the bomb. They worship nuclear power and like radiation and stuff like that. And in Fallout 3, one character's bowing down to a bomb which is in the center of a city which never went off. You know, and they're like a major cult which are obsessed with just radiation. Like, they made a god out of it. They believe because the world is now full of radiation, that radiation is the god of this world type of thing. And I was just thinking about the idea of ghoulification, which is a big thing in the game. Again, this is what happens is some people became feral ghouls, which were just mindless zombies. Others just became ghouls, which still had the human cognitive thoughts, and they end up living, just going on and on and on and living and living and living. And is it possible, is that a reference to people who lived in the light of Atom, which is God, you know,
right.
Lived longer, you know, and they're making this joke that it's people who lived in the radiation which emitted from the bombs, Atom, you know, lived longer. And is that a tongue-in-cheek reference to people who lived when Christ was around, lived longer in his light, not radiation, but light, you know? Was that another parallel, perhaps, symbolically? I'm just speculating here, you know.
Possibly. I think the one thing that Jay brought up, Jay's pretty interesting. He's got he's definitely got some different theories than we've got, and he's kind of like drawn from a lot of the same texts that we are. And what he was basically saying, like, that, you know, we're kind of products of our environment, like what we look like and what we do and what we say obviously is based on the current conditions on the world right now. You know, like what were they like before? And so it made me think about like, you know, I think we brought it up on like when we were talking about cryptids, and I said, isn't it interesting? Like you have like a farm raised pig, and it gets out into the woods, and it's like a very short amount of time before it gets long hair, like thick black hair, tusks. It becomes a boar. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the same animal. It doesn't take generations for this to happen. It's like literally it changes because of the different environment it's put in. And so the thing that tripped me out, I watched this show kind of recently, this movie, The Time Machine. Have you ever seen that? It's got Guy Pearce in it.
It rings a bell from years ago. I've not seen it, but go ahead.
I was watching this, and it's an okay flick. You'd probably be interested in it just based on what I'm going to tell you at the end. So he keeps going into the future, and then at one point they're talking about mining the moon. And so when they do this, obviously it ends up messing up the Earth or something like that. Obviously there's something that the moon falls or something, right, and then it causes all kinds of problems. So then he like gets hurt or something like that. He falls like on the lever of the time machine. He goes way into the future. And so when he gets super far into the future, it looks like the past. You have these people who look kind of primitive, and they're like living on like kind of up high. Hmm. And then there's a point, and it looks great though. At some points, it looks pretty good, except for there are these humanoid, like really strong things that come out of the ground and pull people into the ground. And they just like, these are just the other people or these other things that just snatch people and take them. Hmm. So at one point, Guy Pearce is like, he's like, well, this is not acceptable. We got to go find them. So they go down into the earth, and he comes in contact with this wicked looking humanoid guy. I mean, he looks mostly human, but he's got super pale skin, super like pale hair, long hair, like evil eyes. And he starts to tell him that they genetically engineered these things to get them food, to be their food, you know, to get them the food source. And so what he goes on to tell them is that they are a remnant, like he is a remnant from this people who went underground when it was unsustainable on the earth. And there was a time where they were going to go back on top of the earth to repopulate it, but they couldn't because they had adapted to the subterranean environment. Yeah. And they started to develop these kind of obviously inhuman looking characteristics. And I was like, whoa, like, you know, because obviously that kind of falls in line with like the stuff that's happened in Fallout. Obviously they're doing weird genetic experiments in certain vaults and stuff. And I'm like, I guess it's the thing that's like, it started to trip me out to think that everybody's all aware of all the underground stuff. Like what kind of level of infrastructure could be there under the earth? And like, could there really be people? I mean, like, what if that just like the game Fallout, there's literally people under the ground who don't know what's going on up here because they're talking. You almost see it very similar in the way that they're going to repopulate the earth at some point because they knew what happened before, and they're down there, and maybe they are changing. And the fact that these people are like cannibalistic, it's kind of makes sense. I mean, it kind of makes sense like that if you went, you know, kind of like almost like the Lord of the Rings, you know, Gollum was Schmeagol once, right? He was like this thing, and eventually they kind of show him under the ground, and his appearance is changing. He no longer looks like one of the hobbits. He looks like a demon.
There is a scientific name for that. I can't remember what it is. It's like adaptive evolution or something like that. It's not evolution in like the millions of years you change to your environment. It's like people change, like so people do change, and animals change based on their environment quite quickly. I think is it macroevolution or something like that, I think is the official term for it.
Well, I guess it would, yeah. Well, I guess that would be more like, that would seem like more like microevolution.
Microevolution. I think that's what it is. Yeah. There is a name for it. I think that's the one I'm blanking right now. But
well, like I said, if you stayed indoors all all the time, obviously, if there was no light, obviously we know our skin would change dramatically. You know, like, and what do you do? I mean, obviously, it's like, well, yeah, we're a product of our environment. You have to go walk here. You have to go lift this. So we got certain kinds of muscles. Our posture is this because we do this. And it's like, if you went down there, imagine if you were born, like somebody was born into darkness down there and like you never saw light. Like, what would you Like, how would your body adapt to that?
It's funny, isn't that what Bane says in Batman or something like that? He was born in the darkness or something like that. And he has a pit, doesn't he, of some kind? I can't remember. Yeah. But that's kind of a running theme through a lot of films. Then quite often they go down the reptilian route. These reptiles underground, like humanoid type reptilians who need to eat human flesh, exist underground. You know, and could it be that these are just humans who have adapted to the new environment, who fled the tribulation and judgment of Christ, perhaps, you know, and had to be underground for 1,000 years, you know, to avoid what was coming upon them, and they've turned into monsters. That's also possible too, because again, this can happen in a short period of time, you know, not millions of years, but hundreds of years. Things can change quite quickly, you know.
You know, like Brian and I had a theory, and of course, I remember, I think he's talking about doing this on one of the episodes of Ancient Angels, but I'm going to say it anyways, is that we were talking about like all the weird apes around the world, like the different kinds of primates. And if you look them up, you probably have. Some of them look super demonic looking, like the faces are like red and like evil, and just they look so strange. Like I have a hard time believing that God created those things to look like that. And so I did wonder aloud, like, what if that's a product of de-evolution? Like, I don't believe in evolution, but I do believe that obviously with the second law of thermodynamics, things get worse.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have like an incestuous kind of like inbred population, I mean, like, is that possibly what they could look like at some point? Living feral in the woods. So with that being said, this is so weird. Obviously, this is just me thinking out loud. I saw an article today, and it said that they were digging up some primate's tomb in like Russia or something. And I was like, primates? They got tombs for primates? And I guess primate is a name for bishop in some kind of a church. Have you ever heard that?
I've not heard that before, but that makes more sense than monkeys.
I know, but I also think that obviously our language is a way it is for certain things. I was like, those are two things that don't really seem like the other. Like, why are they called primates? I mean, you think primate, primitive, primate, bishop, like, what? I guess point being is like that we really don't know. I mean, we really don't know what kind of changes people could make, but I mean, it kind of explains a little bit like the gray alien kind of thing. Like, what if those are just people who are like really jacked up? I mean, like really kind of like have gone down that route. Like maybe those people are not deep, you know, the gray aliens are not demons. They literally are some kind of form of humanoid because they're subterranean and they're not like us anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, aliens have big eyes, like typical greys. It's possible that was an adaptation to see in the dark because they're constantly in subterranean conditions. Pale grey skin, no sunlight can cause that as well. Emaciated limbs, thinner arms and legs. You know, maybe I don't know what kind of civilization they had underground, but maybe there was a situation if they were the elites before Jesus came. Maybe they didn't have to do much heavy lifting or much at all. It's highly possible. Yeah, the greys today are the people of the past. You know, who
well, you have like knows? Again, like in the we talked about this, and I know you said you might not have time for it, but I was like revisiting like the Lord of the Rings stuff, and I know the Hobbit movies were terrible, but there's I'm not sure which one it was, but they go into like where there's the Goblin King and all that stuff that's under the ground.
I think that's the Hobbit.
Yeah. But you're like, okay, so goblins and these things are kind of human, but they're kind of not. They're cannibalistic. It's like those things do look pretty human in a lot of ways. And what? I mean, that's what I was saying. Like with the little season, the Tolkien stuff actually makes maybe even a little more sense, because I was saying, like, I thought for sure that the story of the Lord of the Rings was like, okay, this is an antediluvian story. But that really does not ring true, because again, like the men are like knights, right? Like there's knights, there's castles. I don't think this is kind of showing more of a medieval atmosphere. And like, to me, isn't it kind of interesting how, like, obviously Sauron's Satan. I mean, even Sauron is represented by an evil eye. And it's like they think that he's gone, and like what does they say, like, you know, history becomes myth becomes legend, you know, things are forgotten that should have never been forgotten, and he's allowed to come back in some kind of way. Before he leaves, he puts himself into this ring, and he's secretly kind of like he's left, but he hasn't left, and he's manifesting it. And obviously that's clearly what's corrupting people at the end. And the thing is, like, that makes a lot of sense because we know biblically the flood wiped out all the bad things. It wasn't men fighting wars to get rid of the abominations. It was God just did that with his own righteous judgment. So it makes more sense in things like, we don't know what the Middle Ages were like. We don't know if some of the stuff could have been like this. And again, to go to like the whatever happened during the mud flood, maybe that's why, again, those are the fossilized things of all the weird stuff that we really don't even have a clue about. Like, they were maybe outside of the civilization. You know, what do they even talk? They even talk about it in there. It's like that. It's going to be like the time of men, right? Like that's what they're talking about. Is that potentially talking about like they're going to have a king, millennial reign, maybe? Maybe.
Well, I think at the end, you know, the elves, which are an advanced race who live forever, kind of an immortal race of advanced humanoids, basically. Call them saints, maybe. You know, they leave to go to the middle, well, somewhere. They go off on a boat, you know, and it's the end of the age of magic, and it's now for the age of men or something like that. Is how the series ends, and is that not basically, you know, Jesus leaving with his saints to give the world over to humanity? You know, there's that as well.
That's interesting.
At the end, it's honestly, there's so much in the Lord of the Rings, and it is like a 10-hour saga I watched when I was like 15, and I need to go back and rewatch the whole thing.
Well, I had assumed that the elves were angels, but that kind of works too. But I still think I kind of lean toward the elves being angels.
Well, the elves were kind of like an advanced race among everything, you know, and they were always sought after, and they held the meetings for all the kings, you know, when the ring was given to Frodo, they went to the elves, didn't they, to seek counsel and to find out what we're going to do next about this thing. It was all hosted by the elves, and in a way, is that not kind of like people coming to the saints to intermediate on matters of great importance, you know? And it's kind of, obviously it's all a paganish British mythology, Celtic mythology, Norse mythology mashup spin on everything, isn't he? Because he created his own mythology, basically, based off of European mythos. So
it is.
There's a lot to be said.
That's an interesting interpretation, because it does kind of fit that the elves would be angels, but they're also living amongst the people. Like, obviously, we know that if they wanted to show, if Tolkien wanted to imagine them as angels, wouldn't they be in some kind of like a elevated place where they live, maybe at the top of a mountain or something? But they kind of lived amongst, they had their own little place, and they were leaving that place to go away for a certain reason. So it almost, and I mean, obviously, if you think about the timing of it, Sauron's back, they're leaving.
Well, they kind of only left after they dealt with the evil. They got involved. They did all the wars.
Well, but I guess the point is like they were leaving anyways.
Yeah.
You know, because like in the first movie, it's like I think they're trying to say like that the men are wicked. We don't care. We're leaving anyways. Like we're leaving these shores, and like so at the end they leave, but they weren't like, was it Elrond or whatever? He was saying we're out of here. Yeah. And it was almost kind of like, well, whatever you guys are going to just, like, you guys are on your own kind of here. And eventually he gets talked into it. But, like, it was like it just so happened that it was like they were sensing that Sauron was coming back, and then they were leaving.
Oh, yeah, like Satan's return. Exactly. It's just, it's time for the season.
It's kind of like, let's let him do his thing. And it's men's job to stand up to this. And it's like, wow, that actually makes sense, because, again, where we don't have contact with the saints.
Well, it's like Return of the King as well. It's kind of all in the language, isn't it? It's sort of very Christ-like language all throughout. And there's a lot to be said about C.S. Lewis and Tolkien being together, and obviously the battles between Catholicism and Christianity, and the debates. And there's a lot. Christian mythos runs through that literature, like through and through, you know, and it's kind of like Christ established on the throne, but it's that good and evil dichotomy battle. It's basically Star Wars with swords, you know, with knights instead of lightsabers, and it's kind of there's always that undercurrent of like a perversion of the truth in some way, which always made me kind of wonder about these works, because again, they capture the imaginations of people, these type of books, and people obsess over the lore to the point where they know more about the lore of this fictional mythos of Tolkien than they do about the lore of our own world and life through the biblical lens. If they put as much attention as they did into these fictional realms as they did into biblical lore and history, they would realize that the truth is far more interesting and fascinating and deeper and complex than anything that the Silmarillion involves, you know, his little extra book and the languages he invented for Tolkien. Like, Tolkien pales in comparison to the truth of the lore of reality, you know, and it's far more psychedelic and trippy than Middle Earth. Like what we are, what we have to deal with, and what the reality is. It might seem mundane from our current Western perspective in our little boxes with our little offices and our 9-to-5 jobs, but the truth is, it's what was and what is currently going on is a fantasy epic beyond all comprehension, and it would take a lifetime to fully flesh out and figure out what was really going on, and we don't live long enough to figure it all out. That's kind of the eternal refrain of mankind, isn't it? We're just not capable of fully comprehending the big picture of what's really going on here. So I find Tolkien's work fascinating. I think it's, you know, but again, I think go ahead, sorry. Okay,
no, I was just gonna say, I think what I was seeing even last night, we were talking about to Jay, is that okay, so we believe that the Bible's the truth. We believe our worldview is the right one. But again, like, if these mythologies, they're all coming from a true story. Yeah. All of them.
Oh, yeah.
All of them come from a true story. Now, again, that doesn't mean they're facts. It means, like, there's one true story, and then there's lots of stories based on the real one. Mm-hmm. So some people, like, maybe you could easily project your own truth upon things. That's why people would watch The Matrix and say, oh, well, Neo is Jesus. And I was like, or you could say Neo is the Antichrist. Mm-hmm. Because he actually he checks those boxes, too. Like, that's why people can fall for Gnostic Hollywood movies, because, oh, well, the good guy is Jesus, right? Because we know Jesus is good and we know the devil's bad. It's like, but these guys, they twist things, you know, that they invert things. And it seems like that's why Thor can't be the devil because he's good. It's like, yeah, that's how they see him. Like, that's obviously how the story's written, that he is good, even though he's rebellious and he's all the things he shouldn't be. And so when you think about it like that, oh, well, obviously the Lord of the Rings is like kind of like a Christian Catholicism story, which I know that Tolkien was a Catholic. But what if it's really not the Christian story? It's just like, when I was a kid, I believed that, wait a minute, Empire Strikes Back, is the Force God? I was like, is this a Christian movie? And my parents had to tell me, no, it's actually really New Agey. And like, as a kid, like, I didn't know what that meant. But like, you're assuming that, like, this is a Jesus type story because Jesus is good. The good guys win, the bad guys lose. You know, that's how these stories end up. But then you see the other mythologies in there where, like, Yoda's like this demon from like the Freemasonries. You know, like, you see pictures of, like, look exactly like Yoda. All of the, you know, there's all the imagery with Darth Vader being like a high priest. I did a video about that a long time ago, that he looks like he wears like the ephod here. He literally goes down and kneels and contacts his master in the inner chamber like he's the high priest. And then eventually, like, in the lore, that Anakin is born to a virgin, and you know, he obviously gets redemption at the end, but he is bad. Like, I mean, that's the story of it. And it's like, so that's more like representative of like what we would consider obviously the ultimate good guy. So yeah, you kind of wonder, like, that you can be influenced in these ways where, like, yeah, they're kind of telling you the true things, but maybe we're trying to project ourselves on it. Because again, the Return of the King, Aragorn ain't Jesus, and they don't try to make him out to be there. It's like, that would be more like, probably more like an Antichrist figure. It's like that he's the savior of men, some other man, not, you know, not God.
Yeah.
And
well, that's, they always, it's like they always make it out like it's an eternal battle between good and evil. It's the forces of Sauron versus the forces of good, which is mankind and the elves and everyone else combined together. You know, and you know in Star Wars, it's the dark side versus the good side. You know, and all this type of thing. That's kind of the paradigm we need to get out of, which is what all media is gearing us towards, and they use Christian-ish language and symbolism to mix in with these stories, because it's kind of, they want you to believe that, you know, the balance needs to be restored or something, and you know, Jesus has an equal in Satan, you know, or something like that, and they're equally balanced in forever in lockstep in a yin and yang cycle of balance forever. You know, good will always fight evil and none will ever overcome the other, but there will be a perpetual cycle or something. And it's kind of, that's so new age, that's so Gnostic, or it's many principles mashed together, and
isn't that the Albert Pike? Like, yes, like Lucifer is God, but so is Yahweh.
Yeah,
of course, in their yin and yang.
Yeah, you can't have one without the other. You know, but that's not
Yahweh is actually the bad one.
Yeah,
He's not the light side.
But the truth of it all is that left, right, black, white, good and evil, hot, cold paradigm is false. It's an illusion. None of that's real. There is only one true God, and that's in Jesus, you know, God through Jesus, and there is no equal to him. There is no, you know, dark side that can battle the light, and they need to find some kind of perpetual balance and peace from it. There's just Jesus, and nothing will defeat him. It's just plain and simple. You need to get right with him. There is no real side to choose when you actually get down to it. You know, either you accept him or you reject him, and that's all it comes down to. And but they want you to believe you could join the dark side or join the light side, and you know, and each has their own benefits in some way. That's not what's going on. You know, that is not the truth in any way, shape, or form. There's no real power in either. There's only one way. And that's the truth. And I find these stories tend to gnosticize, or, you know, create these false dichotomies that just really don't exist in reality, only exist in myth and fantasy, you know.
Well, you know what's funny is I was just thinking about it too, like, so in the like a movie like The Lord of the Rings, it's the men need to step up, right? Like the men actually need to do what they're supposed to do, and it's like, so these higher beings are leaving, and it's up to man to do what man's supposed to do. And I was kind of thinking about it, like, I can't remember if I brought this up to you before. Somebody told me this recently, and they were saying that, so Doc Marquis, who was formerly, like, I guess, in the Illuminati, he became born again Christian, escaped, then he's kind of talking about a lot of things. But he said at one point that the people, like the Luciferians, believe that Jesus actually did already come back. And so the reason that they worship the God they do is because he's the only God left. And I thought, whoa, what a concept that is. If I can't remember, I've seen other things in culture, and I have to probably pay closer attention to this, where it's almost like that we've been abandoned. I think they might even say that in Fight Club. And it's like that we've been abandoned by God. And like that they kind of see this as, well, he's left now and he's gone, and it's up to us now. Which obviously makes sense that of a humanistic, you know, like mythos of like, it's up to us now to be the gods, and there's only one God who's actually helping us achieve a level of our own, and that is the God of the knowledge, the gnosis. Yeah, I mean, it starts to make more sense, where it's like what they believe is obviously crazy. I mean, it's not the truth, but it's kind of crazy, like a fox, where it's like they decide to throw their lot in now with Jesus because we can't see him. He actually already came back. He's gone. He's wherever he's at. They don't believe it's going to come, you know. Obviously, they believe parts of the Bible, but they don't believe the Bible to be. They actually believe it's code, right? Yeah. Which, funny enough, it's like a lot of Christians believe, oh, we got to crack the code of Revelation. It's like that's what they believe, that, oh, it's certain, these things are allegories. This is representative of this, and this is representative of that. It doesn't mean what it says. Yeah, Jesus didn't mean what he said. He was actually telling the apostles behind what all this really meant. and I can tell you what it means.
Yeah.
That actually sounds like, again, like the devil's slick, and it sort of makes sense.
You should be careful trying to define what a Gnostic believes, because they'll always tell you that's not real Gnosticism. It's like communism; they're always shifting that goalpost, unfortunately. But it's all down to metaphorical interpretation of literal statements in the Bible. Yeah, it's all allegory. It's all symbolic. Christ wasn't a real man who died for our sins or the Son of God. Christ was a symbol to represent the Christ within us all, and we all need to ascend and unlock the Christ within to become Christ-like ourselves. Often through an oil that goes up the spine or something like that. You know. They have, honestly, it's endless, their interpretations.
An oil that goes up the spine?
Yeah, it's like they believe that Christ is actually the Christos oil, some kind of liquid that goes up the spine, which represents the cross. Honestly, they have so many interpretations. I've heard so many wild things about how you activate the Christ within, the Christ consciousness, you know, and that's what Christ was really talking about when he said the kingdom is within and all these type of things. It's kind of... It's anything but Christ as a separate entity to them that they need to follow. It's just the inversion of no. We're all Christ collectively. It's the New Age angle, but with a bit more extra steps, you know.
that message is talked about in big churches in America, like like they, you know, it's like the idea that Jesus didn't really become Jesus until the baptism, until the Holy Spirit descended on, and then he became like God then. And just like you, when you get the Holy Spirit, you can be Jesus. It's only up to you to basically claim that anointing, and then you can speak things just like, because if we have the Holy Spirit, we can speak things into existence just like God can.
Yeah, I mean, it's you will be as gods. It's the same promise that the serpent promised in the Garden of Eden. You know, so what better spin for the New Age? Because this is the thing: you find a lot of New Agers get into the crystal chakra alignment, serpentine, kundalini energy stuff. Okay, and then they eventually grow out of that. You know, once they grow up, basically. And then they still don't want to believe in God or Christ, so then they go to the next thing, which is Gnosticism or Hermeticism or alchemy or something like that. You know, the next step in believing you are your own God, but none of that childish crystal stuff anymore, not orgone energy. Now I understand the true principles of reality now through Gnosis, you know, because I have downloaded through the ether of consciousness the truth of Christ, you know, and I'm the true Christians. We were the persecuted ones in the early age, you know, we were the ones who had... Yeah, we were the ones that had the truth that they want to suppress, you know, and only our interpretations of the biblical text are the true ones, and it's all personal to ourselves and has to be downloaded through a gnosis to understand what the text really means. Jesus didn't mean what he said when he said it. He was actually talking in allegory for spiritual and physical and alchemical principles, you know, and it's basically the New Agers became wizards. Like they believe I'm now a hermetic alchemical wizard now, and I have all this knowledge and understanding through gnosis about the truth of God and reality. It's pride. I know more than you. Therefore, I'm better than you. I'm more
salvation through knowledge, and the reason I got knowledge is because I'm better than you.
I'm more saved.
I'm smarter than you.
I'm more saved than you are because I know all this extracurricular stuff, and it's kind of, but what you know is basically convinced yourself that you think you're a god now. You know, you think you have Christ within, and you are Christ, and you've unlocked Christ consciousness or something. And the sad thing is, you look at these people's lives and you realize they are far from an example of Christ. Usually, it's ego through and through. It's the worst kind of pride, because they come out of this Gnostic, so this New Age angle to begin with, where they had spirit guides telling them that they need to unlock the true consciousness and open the third eye. It's kind of like, once they snap out of that, it's the next step. They always go to Gnosticism, and then eventually they'll realize this knowledge they think they have, their interpretations are leading them nowhere and actually making their life a lot worse. And it's usually by example of failure and misery that they eventually realize, you know, Christ was a separate real entity from myself who had a very clear message, and what I'm doing is not getting closer to him at all. And it's realizing I'm not God, and everybody's on their journey to realize that everyone's the God of their own universe until they find Christ. That's basically how it goes.
Well, that's good. It's actually I probably got to run in a second, but it was interesting. My brother sent me this old clip from Keith Green. You remember him? He was like a Christian singer. You ever heard of him?
Beyond me, that one, unfortunately.
Yeah, he was kind of like my mom's generation of Christians when they first started listening. He's kind of like, he died in a plane crash, I think, when he was pretty young. But he was saying like kind of his path to finding Jesus was saying like that all the other religions actually kind of revere Jesus, saying, oh yeah, he was an ascended master. He was this, he was that. He's definitely a way to heaven. You could be like him. You could do it. But he says, so every one of them, you know, basically like the Buddhists would say, oh, he was a version of Buddha. He was this, he was that. And he's like, but then when you actually go to see what Jesus said, he says, I'm the only way. Mm-hmm. And so if they all say this and he says he's the only way, well, then I'm going to believe him. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it is kind of that simple where like, it makes sense that they try to co-opt what like the devil would do, try to co-opt the truth a little bit, you know, feed you a little bit of lies. And then, but God, obviously, I think that, you know, praise God that he is so straightforward. The Bible is way more straightforward than people ever want you to, you know, ever want to tell you it is. Mm-hmm. It's easy to understand. The gospel is easy to understand. Like I said, obviously God humbles the prideful. He elevates the humble. You know, you're supposed to treat each other well. And like, yeah, you can see like who the kingdom of God is when like the Sermon on the Mount. Mm-hmm. It's for the low in spirit. It's for this, it's for that. It's not for the prideful. It's not for the people who have riches right now. It's for the people who are lowly and, mm-hmm. you know.
Well, pride and vanity has its effect on people. I've noticed it as an artist. I used to sell artwork and paintings years ago, you know, when I was in university, and I had this painting, and I can't remember what it was of now. I think it was of a hand. It doesn't matter. Anyways, it was this random painting, and I didn't know what to value it at the time because they clearly saw more in it than I did, and because it was a friend of mine had said, "Oh, my friends are interested in buying that painting." And I said to him, okay, well, I'll do it for £50, you know. And then he said, okay. And he told them that. And then before I got a response, I said, actually, no, that's too much. I'm charging it's not worth that. I know it's not worth that. It didn't take me long to make, you know. And I undervalued myself, whatever, you know. I wasn't really thinking at the time. I said, I'll do it for 30. That's what I said, you know. Tell them I'll do it for 30, you know. It's fine. And they said, he basically came back to me and said, oh, they don't want it anymore. Now that I've offered them a lower price. And I was like, what? You know, and I realised that they didn't want the artwork. They wanted to be able to tell their friends who were looking at the piece on the wall that they paid a lot of money for a piece of artwork.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And that's you can apply that attitude to salvation. People want to say, well, I got here through hard work. I got my salvation because I did more than that person over there. You know, I paid more of a price for my salvation, therefore I'm better than you. It's that kind of way of viewing things. And they don't want it if it's easy, if it's cheap. They don't want salvation if it comes easily. They want to say that they've done more than somebody else to get it, you know. And that's basically what that attitude is. That's what Gnosticism is all about, really. It's like salvation with way too many extra steps. But it's those extra steps they want to feel like they've, you know, and it's kind of, it's an unnecessary journey. You can cut all that crap out and just get straight to being saved without having to learn all this esoteric wisdom first. You know, you don't need any of that. And it's probably best to get saved with a real context for what Christ really was first before learning about all that stuff and those interpretations. So you have a better context to understand what's going on and not be deceived, you know. And sadly a lot of people get swept up in all sorts of allegorical nonsense when it comes to interpreting scripture because they've come at it straight from a Gnostic perspective. And even myself, you know, for a year or two I was probably there before I got the long way around to Christ. And I understand the belief, I understand the attitude, and it's like I said, they want to say that they did more to get there than somebody else. And the gospel is easy, you know. It is
easy. I think, but you're right, man. And that's like, I was just thinking about the whole faith versus works thing too, because it's like some people say, "Oh, well, it's not about works," but you're like, "No, it's not, but it is." You know what I mean? Like, because you're not saved by your works, but like when you believe, you do things. Your faith is, you know, the works is the evidence of your faith.
But it's not the thing that saves you. Yeah.
It's not the first. It's like it's obviously this is a chicken before the egg. The egg is the egg's first in the situation. God's grace, faith in Jesus, and then begats the chicken, who are the works, the evidence of your faith. But you're not saved by the works. You're saved by this. You have to accept this. And I think that's why I said, obviously, you sound like a good example of this. And I would say myself, it's like I had to hit a bottom in order to get it. Like, okay, now I'll accept your help because I need it. And I won't make it if I don't have it. And then so when you accept that and it does change you, then you're like, you don't take credit for it. You don't take credit for, oh, I was so good and then I made this right choice here. And because I was smart enough to know what I was supposed to do. I mean, I guess God gave me enough to know to cry out to him at the end, but I only got help from him and I couldn't have made it without him. It wasn't because I was good. And it's obviously that's why, you know, I think some people who give us crap for, you know, extending the olive branch when we, you know, because God was patient with us. And I think that's the whole point is like that. I don't think people understand that enough, that if you don't forgive, you won't be forgiven. If you don't, like, you kind of like, you extend the measure of like what you want, because I think that knowing that I'm still not very good, despite what anybody says, because I know my weakest moments and what like checking my own intentions all the time. I want so much grace at the end. I want everybody, you know, like I said, you want more people to get into heaven and not less, and not be so quick to call out the people who are X, Y, and Z and saying they're definitely going to hell. It's like, I don't want to say anybody's definitely going to hell, because I don't want.
We do well. So I'm pretty sure I was before I got saved, and it's kind of people get saved. You can't make those calls. It's not for us to make.
No,
it really isn't. All we can do is just try our best to be an example and a light. And the forgiveness thing is one of the hardest things for most people to get past. And again, I get that. I really empathise with why that's difficult. Who wants to believe that murderers and the worst of the worst could be saved, you know, and get into heaven as long as they accept Jesus Christ as the truth and repent of those sins and sincerely have a change of heart. I mean, you have to know that all that stuff, it's not a free pass just by saying, well, I believe in Jesus now, so everything's okay. Don't get me wrong. You have to mean it. It has to be sincere, and real change has to come from it. And those are the fruits that come afterwards, you know, but it's exactly what you said. And I think that's why, like, some of these things are like, they're simple concepts, but they've been complicated by other men saying, oh, well, all you got to do is say this prayer and you're good. Yeah. You don't, no matter what you do after that, you're going to heaven. And you're like, that's not what it says. And I think that's what you're saying. Like, so once you like, the evidence is this, and that's how Jesus said we would know who they are. But I get at the same time, like, it's not up to us to say X, Y, or Z. We'll just say that I feel like that we can alienate so many people by, like, being harsh, when you could say, I'm going to give, back to Tucker, we'll give him the benefit of doubt. I'm not going to immediately say, shill, these guys trying, I mean, like, but at the same time, we need to be vigilant. We should be, you know, what is wise as serpents and innocent as doves. The sad thing is, there are people out there who will call me a shill for not immediately pointing at Tucker and calling him one.
I know, that's what I was saying. Obviously, you and I both, where it's like that people are, I mean, some of those people are just so, the comment section sometimes in our videos now, I'm just like.
Well, I made a video about the comments because I'm starting to think there's a lot of AI trickery going on these days. And I'm not the paranoid type who would normally say stuff like this, but I've noticed over a decade a huge shift in the style of comments I've started to receive. And there's an uncanny valley to some of the comments, you know, where AI gets a little bit too, it's trying to be human, but not quite. And it looks weird and makes you feel weird when you look at it, you know, the AI art.
Yeah.
That's happening to some of the comments now. I'm noticing there's like an inhumanness to some of it, or a rigidness, or it's like something's off about some of these comments. And I'm starting to think a lot of it is AI algorithm programs designed to derail us and make us feel bad about ourselves and to completely you know, I think that is something to happen.
Well, you know, that's the thing that it's funny, like, you saying that, like, I feel kind of stupid for not picking up on that more, because you make TikTok videos there's a million bots. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm used to just the certain bots, and you look, and so like on an app like that, you look who made that comment, you know, 0 followers, following 7,000 people, block, block, block. You know, you're on a live stream, you're having these comments, are obviously block, bot, block, bot. But for some reason, I wasn't making the connections that, yeah, like that you're getting the same kind of comments. And sometimes you do wonder, like, that, you know, the Little Season, this is kind of some upper level Christian conspiracy things people have had to know. And sometimes it is concerning, because you're like, how can you be so inhuman to people that are, or just, automatically have the worst impulse, like, oh, well, Paul did this. Well, obviously it's because this. And you're like, now, why would you immediately assume that? Because it is unhuman.
Well, humans tend to assume the best rather than the worst immediately. You know, it's kind of like I don't believe some. I argue with them sometimes stupidly. You know, I comment back, and my response is like, how can you be just so myopic? Like, of course, that's not going on, what you just said. It's like, why would you even think that was happening? And I realize it's like, I'm probably talking to a bot here. This is not really what's going on. You know, people don't tend to speak or act like this, is what I'm realizing when I see some of these comments. It's like, who genuinely thinks like this? It's kind of like, people don't think like this. They are being intentionally inflammatory. They are saying things because they purposefully know it's going to rile people up. And I made a video showing how comment sections in social media are thoroughly controlled, to the point where they are purposely trying to cause division within people. And I use an example. It's doing the rounds. This video of a girl who she's made a TikTok herself about a TikTok that she was looking at. And she says, I was watching this TikTok about a girl complaining every half an hour, updating about how her boyfriend has not responded to her about a date they were supposed to have. It keeps being, I'm going to be late, I'm going to be half an hour late, or something like that. And all the comments to this woman complaining about her man being late is, she was looking at it, it's loads of women saying, red flag, stay away from him, he's got no respect for you, all this type of thing. Just women hating on this man, you know, for being late for a date, basically. But then she said, I showed my boyfriend the exact same video on his phone, and in his comment sections, it's men defending the man, saying, could he not just simply have an emergency at work? Why is she still being so disrespectful to him? He doesn't need this, all that type of stuff, you know. And she couldn't find any of the comments that she saw on his feed, and he couldn't find any of the comments that she was seeing on his, and vice versa. And you realise that was purposely done and used and designed to cause friction and division between the sexes. The only difference is that one's a man and one's a woman. And if they're doing that just on a basic level, just to normies out there to cause division on a divide down the sex line, down the male-female line, what are they doing in comment sections for people who are quite literally out there messing things up for the narrative? You know, it's kind of...
Yeah, well, you think about it, like, I'm sure you deal with this a lot too. It's like, why are you deleting comments, Paul? And you're like, I haven't even looked at this. I haven't even looked at this video. I haven't deleted one comment, but I've experienced that too, where I've made a comment and I'm like, where's my comment at? And it's like, sometimes I wonder, it's like, that could be used to cause division, because they'd be like, you know, I know a lot of people, the comments you probably get where like they're super long, well thought out. Like, why'd you delete that, Paul? It took me, I didn't save that. Like, what am I supposed to type it again? And so they're frustrated with you, and you didn't do anything. I don't delete comments unless they're just completely vile. You know, something like that. But,
if you're swearing at me and getting violent, I'm going to remove your comment, because I don't need to see that.
They're blasphemous or something like that.
Nobody needs to see that. You're just going to cause an argument for no reason. Yeah, fair enough. You know, but I tend to let my platform be a relatively free speech platform. But I've tried to explain to people, look, my wife has tested this in real time. Okay, she sat next to me, she's made a comment on my video, and the comment doesn't turn up, okay, anywhere. And then 3 to 4 hours later, it will turn up in my studio withheld comment section. 3 hours later, you know, and it'll ask.
That's so weird. I mean, obviously their algorithm is better than that. That seems stupid.
It's like the holding comments back and only releasing them at a time-sensitive moment on purpose. And it's kind of like humans don't have the time to control that kind of thing. There's not an FBI agent somewhere looking at your feed, clicking and typing away.
You're assigned to Paul.
Yeah, you know what I mean? This is all computer-based. This is all done through algorithm and AI, quite clearly, you know. And AI just literally withholds comments, scans them, breaks the word down, the sentence down, and it'll judge whether or not it wants to release that comment now. Do I want to release, the AI will say, do I want to release this comment now while the video's busy and active and people are going to see it? Or should I wait a day or two to release the comment when no one's watching anymore? That's usually when they'll do it, you know. And it's that kind of thing. That's the kind of game that's going on. It's not people doing this. It's quite clearly algorithms doing it. And I have no control. I have, like, if your comment's not appearing in my comment section, I haven't even seen it.
That's what I'm saying. I know. I mean, I know. That's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you because I know that I experienced the same thing where, like, you post a somewhat controversial video and you're gonna get some blowback. And then people think you're deleting your comments, and it's like I literally don't. I mean, I don't. I mean, I want you to be able to disagree with me. I'm not right every time.
No, but there are those comments out there that I get them all the time, and it's kind of like, why did you just say that? So me and you know, we did the Nephilim Death Squad podcast, you know, and it was streamed on my channel. Somebody left a comment saying, why didn't you talk about who we are after the millennial reign and the resurrection of the dead? Why didn't you mention this, the resurrection, all this type of stuff? Was it deceit? Are you out to deceive everybody? Why would it's like, why wouldn't you mention that? Clearly you must be an evil deceiver out there on purpose. And I'm like, who thinks like that? Like, and first of all, and I literally said, my first video on this entire topic, when I first started to discuss it, was quite literally titled, Who Are We If the Millennial Reign Has Ended? Okay, it's quite literally covering that exact topic you want me to talk about. And just because it didn't get brought up in a 2-hour podcast where 4 people are all talking over each other with many questions banned around all over the place, it just didn't come up. But who immediately assumes deception before maybe we just didn't have time to discuss it? It's kind of, I don't think people really think like that. I don't think people really, yeah, obviously people's own perceptions cloud the reality of like what's true, because I think that people assume that like we are, you know, sponsored by somebody. Like I think they think I have a studio. They think that I'm a rich guy. Mm-hmm. You know, they think that they probably think like guys like you and I are raking in the money. And it's like they have this perception where like, well, how could he get to that level unless he's this? I mean, he's got this many Instagram followers where you're like, Instagram doesn't give me any money. It's like you might get a little clout on social media, but you don't, like, you're not paying one bill by your Instagram clout. And so they think that we're this, and so we're controlled because money. But yeah, but the thing is, like, you and I, there's like, obviously, where's the money at? It's like, it's not like we don't get any money, but like this is clearly not a situation where like literally we're celebrities now. No. We're not Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan and Ryan, what's his name? Sean Ryan. We're not making bank doing podcasts. It's like we're doing it because we believe this stuff. But people are so quick to say because they make videos or they don't make videos, and they think that we're controlled opposition. It's like, talk about a very specific controlled opposition. They're like, you know, like we have a long catalog of videos leading up to the ones we've made now. I mean, it took me 10 years to make anything that could be considered a living from this. And it didn't come overnight. It took a lot of years of hard work and consistency. And I can't help it if a natural consequence of me producing content on this platform is that it generates revenue. That's just what happens. And again, I make a relatively minimum wage living doing this, enough to put food on the table and keep the lights on. And that's fine by me. I'm an author. I write books. It's what I do. I'm a creative mind. I like to talk, and people like to listen to what I say. I've always believed, stick to what you're good at, you know, and you'll never work a day in your life. And this is what I enjoy doing. I'm passionate about the subject, and I'm good at it. So I don't feel guilty for
What is it like? Biblically, what does it say? It says, "Do not muzzle an ox when it's treading out the grain." Like it's part of like you're. I mean, Paul goes up to the point of saying like that I'm entitled to money, but I'm not taking it from you because I don't want anyone to say that that's why I'm doing it, or like he says it in certain circumstances. But he obviously tells Timothy that like you can, because obviously we need to do like. I've always said this, like I'm giving the gospel away for free and I'll give it away for free forever. But I mean like, but I do feel like I should probably get paid to edit videos to make it, if you want it to be slick and digestible in some kind of a format that like you like and you can share. Well, I mean, like I said, when you start doing some stuff, this is a lot of work. I enjoy talking about it. Like I said, I'd love to one day be one of those people who has the studio. I plop in the chair. I just sit back and just talk. And then somebody else edits it. Somebody else markets it. And somebody else does all like, yeah, but like I'm sure you're the same as me. I have to go over to the other apps to plug the stuff. I try to cut the videos into fun reels, which take lots of time in order to promote on the social media apps to get them to the podcast, just so I can talk about the things I want to talk about. And it's like, yeah, it's a lot.
It's a full-time job. I mean,
it's a lot. On top of a full-time job and a family and stuff, and then all to be rewarded with this shill talking all this stuff. They're trying to co-opt this message, and you're like, what do we even disagree about? Maybe like sometimes you wonder, like, yeah, the guy's saying, oh, well, you didn't talk about this, so you obviously are trying to lie by omissions. Like, we probably agree about it. I just didn't have time to bring it up.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's usually the case.
So what are you really mad about?
Well, I don't think I don't think they're real people. Well, maybe they are real people, but I don't think their intentions are good. I think they're just trying to rile us up. It's classic trolling. They know the answer. They're just trying to cause division in the comment section.
That's probably likely. Yeah, I mean, obviously it could be. I mean, whether it's a bot or it could. I mean, like that stuff kind of is demonic too, if you think about it, because it really is. It's like, how can we try to derail one of these guys or like discourage them when you're doing what you think is right, and then somebody immediately questions your intentions on why you're doing it. And you're like, I never saw myself sitting in this chair talking to you 3 years ago, but it's just like this is the direction that God's opened doors, and I'm here, and I said I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, I'm grateful. I'm all glory to God. I'm grateful for this as well. I used to be a manager of a supermarket, and I hated every second of it. I'm not a supermarket manager. I'm a conspiracy theorist. This is what I love to do. I love to think about these things, and if I can make a living doing this, I'm going to take it because I want to be happy. I want to be able to live a life I felt like was worth living while I'm here. I want to feel like I've actually made an impact and helped people. And this is how I believe I can do it. And, God has provided, and I took a leap of faith, and I can pay the bills, but I'm not rich, far from it.
No.
I just get
Well, I was wondering though, Paul, though, when are you going to be on Tucker's podcast? I was actually kind of thinking like, do you think that there'll be a day when one of us is going to be sitting down in a chair with like somebody like him? Do you ever think that it would get so mainstream that that could happen?
Yeah, I think it all depends on how you play the game for stuff like that. They won't. It's about how you present yourself.
You're definitely going to get called the shill.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, I've talked to Sam Tripoli. He's a big player. Sam's a really cool guy. He's actually quite funny, And when you end up on those type of platforms, then people start coming to you because they want you on their platform as well. And I did the podcast circuit quite heavily over the last year, talking about the Nephilim Clown connection. I don't know, maybe once I publish the book and start the rounds again, eventually you'll get to the right people.
I asked you the question, but I believe it's people we know it'll happen for. Because I do believe that there's enough of this out there. Well, maybe like a Joe Rogan will bring on somebody we know because like the stuff about the Nephilim, like we got to hear more about this. And obviously, if you write a book and the book's successful, I mean, you're like know. That concept is so kind of like, it's really catchy, obviously, because it draws a lot of people in from every different way. And so now that they know what Nephilim are, everybody already knows clowns are scary. Like that's the kind of stuff that I believe could happen. But yeah, yeah, I'm supposed. Like I said, I told you before that I said I pitched that talking about the little season to Sam because I went on a show once before.
Yeah,
that I think that's going to be fun because I think that's going to blow his mind. What do you think?
Oh,
I think he's open to that kind of thing. I think it's going to be like the culmination of all the conspiracies. It'll be like.
I can already imagine him now. He's gonna be like, "What? let's go, do it. Tell me more." He's gonna. I know what he's gonna be like. Yeah, he's gonna love that. His mind's gonna get blown away. Because that's just what he does. That's his shtick. You know, get overexcited about every topic imaginable. But yeah, I had fun talking with him about the Nephilim clown thing. I don't think he's expected me to talk about what I talked about. I think he thought it was just gonna be like a silly show. But by the end of it, I think he was like, "What was that? What just happened?" Like, what? But the millennial reign stuff, that is by far and far going to be 10 times more mind blowing than anything I said to him about clowns and Nephilim. Like, it's.
We'll have to get you. I think we'll have to maybe get you back on there because that'll be funny. Because especially if you get on there after the book comes out, and then you can kind of talk about it too.
Yeah,
because I think that would be good because I'm like. Because I think that I've heard a little bit. I haven't listened to too many of his podcasts. I listened to a couple before I went on there, and I know he's really into the Tartaria stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I think this. I really do believe like this is the kind of thing that really gets. Well, I got that channel, My Lunch Break.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing a video. I think it comes out tomorrow. Maybe. Yeah, I think it comes out tomorrow. Like they were going to do an hour-long show about the little season.
Really.
Have you ever talked to My Lunch Break?
I've watched a couple of videos, but I've never actually followed him much or got involved. And who else is it? There's My Lunch Break, and there's someone else people keep recommending to watch all the time as well.
John Levi.
I've watched all of John. I used to watch him all the time. I know all about John Levi. It's funny actually. Somebody who co-authored with John Levi reached out to me. He had a radio show, and he wanted me to come on and explain the book of Revelation and what it's all about, but it never happened. The date came and he never responded to me when I asked him, "Okay, we're good to go." You know, so that was strange. But yeah, I know John Levi's work and he's great. And My Lunch Break, I know, is a big player. But someone was telling me he started to humour the idea that maybe it was the millennial reign. But he's more...
like I said, he was. I think he was teasing I mean, I subscribed to his channel a while ago, and I wasn't watching many of the videos. But then I just saw that the Old World Order. Have you seen that movie that came out? The Stu Peters, that Sean Hibbler.
No.
Came out with a. It's mostly just like old world Tartaria stuff, Mud Flood. You know, kind of like. You know, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, for like somebody like you and I, we're not really learning anything new. Couple of things I thought were interesting in it. Actually, I'm trying to get Sean Hibbler on the podcast. I think he said he was going to come on. He did like he's done flat Earth movies and stuff and documentaries. But I think that he was pitching, like My Lunch Break was pitching that if he got over 100,000 subs, he was going to do a 1-hour episode, and the 1-hour episode's about the little season.
Right.
So if you go over to his channel right now, I think it's coming over tomorrow. And I was like, of course, he posted on his community page, and I was like, we've got to talk. And I mean, but it'll be interesting because the Old World Order, they don't touch anything about Jesus, the millennial reign, anything that approaches that. And it almost did feel like there's an omission here. Like it's funny because it's like just like Raven was saying, without the why, I mean, obviously, those people would say the why is free energy, right? That's probably what they would say, which is interesting. Like in that the movie Fallout, they're hiding free energy, but without the real why, it does lose all the kind of oomph to the thing. So like, it'll be interesting to see what he says about that because. Guys who are not, quote unquote Christians, they probably would say that, I'm sure all of them would probably say they're believers or something, but they don't in general make Christian content. I'll be interesting to see what he says about that. I mean, because it's kind of like, I haven't seen his channel to appear to be Christian, I guess, based on what I've seen. So, like, how does somebody who doesn't really talk about Christian things a lot approach that?
Well, so let's just withhold judgment till we see. I mean, at the end of the day as well, I'm not even too bothered how he does it. Because
no, I think it's good.
It takes everybody their own amount of time to come to terms with this concept. I mean, I didn't come to terms with it overnight. I mean, I suppose I'm more predisposed to readily go along with ideas. I even
talked about it on a podcast once, basically kind of debunking it, like over last summer.
I sat on it for a long time before I publicly spoke about it because I didn't know what to make of it at first. You know, I like you had spent years, you know, talking about that Jesus is returning and all these type of things, you know, and tribulation is coming to pass, and I was there, you know, so to then be presented with, no, it's already happened. And you're in a little season, you know. I stewed on it for like 3 years. Even when I didn't have a YouTube channel anymore, and I had to take my 5-year break because my stupid workplace at the time said I couldn't have a channel. You know, it's kind of I was still watching videos, and I was really swimming in the Tartarian stuff and the old world stuff, and then the millennial reign stuff, and you know, I was just trying to make sense of it all, and I didn't have a platform to talk about it then. So it took me years to fully get to grips with it, and it was only in October last year that I made my first video about it, where I was like, okay, so let's hash this out, or let's think about this then. So who are we? Yeah. So who are we? You know, if the millennial reign has already come, well, this is what we have. This is what it says, and then it blew up. You know, and people.
Yeah, well, I think that maybe that it's gonna. I mean, like when channels like that are talking about it, I think obviously the people who are, it switches them on. They're gonna go search bar, Little Season of Satan. It's gonna be like. It's going to be Paul, it's going to be JT, it's going to be Alpha Talks, it's going to be all our friends talking about all this, you know, we're going to be the first people to come up on this stuff, which is obviously, it's pretty exciting. Oh, before I go, I listened to you, it's been a couple of months probably now, and you were talking about the day of the Lord, and you were saying that the day of the Lord might not be as specific as event. Was that you're saying there's been multiple days of the Lord? Did you say that, or did I miss?
I did say that, but I was also referencing Shelley's work from There's No Place Like Home. I think she did quite a lot of stuff on this, explaining how the way the day of the Lord is described. I think it's in Zephaniah. I think it's describing the day of the Lord.
Well, it's described in many places.
Yeah. It's more like it's how judgment goes down in specific locales. It's kind of like a pattern. It's how it happens. When God's wrath comes upon you, this is how it's going to go. And there's many examples of cities experiencing the day of the Lord. And it's not just like the whole earth at once, you know.
You know what? That makes a lot more sense. And it makes a lot more sense that even if we believe that, okay, so we know what happened in Jerusalem in 70 AD, the day of the Lord happened.
Day of the Lord. This is what I mean.
Or a day of the Lord. That happened, but even, so it even says in Revelation that the great city was destroyed in a day, right? Well, we know based on like the way Revelation goes, it's the Whore of Babylon goes, and then the beast goes later. So it's not the same. It was not the same event. It happens later. And so so the thing that really made it click for me was the city of Tanis, Zoan in the Bible. So if you read in Ezekiel 30, it's describing the day of the Lord's coming, and it's coming to Egypt. And all these cities in Egypt, it's saying all these bad things are going to happen in Egypt. And the thing that I always bring up is Zoan. Zoan was what you would call, I guess the Egyptians might have called Tanis. And it's even mentioned in like, the Holy Grail, I think Indiana Jones, the city of Tanis, I think it mentions that it was, I think it was, or maybe it was in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it said that a sandstorm consumed this place, a sandstorm that lasted a year or something. Well, the actual Zoan Tanis is this megalithic site, except for all the megaliths are just scattered, destroyed, burned. And I remember even that guy, was it Jimmy Corsetti, Bright Insight? he did a video about this a long time ago. You ever heard of him?
No, no.
He's kind of one of these guys like in the Graham Hancock mold where he's like,
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and so he was mentioning this place, and he was mentioning the biblical prophecies about this place. There's a foot of a statue over in this place that is, I don't know, like 8 feet long.
Okay.
It's like, and it's all that's left is like the foot. It's like it's clearly was a whole statue there. I mean, you can't even imagine how much the whole thing would, how big it would be. There's like sphinxes that are like scorched on one side. It's like literally like a kid just kicked over a bunch of blocks and they're all over the place. Well, so in Ezekiel, it says this place is going to be burned by fire by God. But what it says later is that Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon is going to carry out all this stuff. So, all right, so it's clearly saying the day of the Lord is coming to Egypt. And then, but it mentions specifically that Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar are going to carry out the violence on these places.
Well, he often uses other nations to bring judgment upon other nations, doesn't he? That's kind of God's modus operandi. And who knows what technology they actually had to do all these things, you know?
Well, well, exactly. Maybe that's a case of like, these people like Nebuchadnezzar were way more advanced than anyone had a clue about. But the main point is like that a lot of the eschatology would be relayed on that, well, the day of the Lord is when this happens, so therefore it hasn't happened yet. Or when has it happened? Like when, and it's like, well, the Bible says that, I mean, like literally in Ezekiel 30, you look this up afterwards, it's like, it says this is coming. The evidence is clear. It happened. I mean, obviously Nebuchadnezzar was before Jesus even came, so
yeah. Well, it's a bit of everything, isn't it? There's many days of the Lord. I think it's a good way of describing when judgment comes to a city. It's a day of the Lord.
It makes sense, you know. Well, it makes sense too in the sense that,
but capital like, T though, the day of the Lord. That would be a tribulation type event.
Well, but I'm saying, I think that might be a situation where Jesus says tribulation's coming. Or in like certain translations, it's the Great Tribulation. So then, therefore, Christians will capitalize the Great Tribulation because this is not normal tribulation. This is the great one. Well, he's talking about Great Tribulation coming to Jerusalem, right? But that doesn't mean the Great Tribulation was everywhere at once. It does say in those times that there's going to be tribulation all over this place. But point being is, that maybe that is why, like, we've tried to focus, you know, we have to think outside this paradigm, which we still are kind of programmed to believe, oh, the tribulation's 7 years, so we need to find a 7-year block during the middle of those times. You know what I'm saying? Like, instead, when it's like, that's not how the day of the Lord's really described. It's like, it's a day of judgment for this place. And so there was a day of that when it happened, and we could say clearly what Jesus was specifically talking about was 70 AD. But if the Romans were destroying Jerusalem on the day of the Lord then, well, who was destroying like the cities in Turkey, the churches in Asia? Wasn't Roman. It
didn't happen overnight, you know, and Rome wasn't destroyed in the day. You know, never mind being built.
Right.
It's kind of, we already have evidence from what we've observed that our history, our timeline's weird, and you know, we understand that the collapse of Rome happened in 500 AD-ish, right? So that's 500 years of destruction we have to account for, of degradation, of that empire being chipped away and destroyed, and for the millennial reign to start, if that's what we want to go off, they'll call it the Dark Ages, you know. But who knows? Like they said, the day of the Lord may literally have meant a series of days of the Lord happening over many time, where each nation would be judged throughout tribulation. Who knows?
I think that's the case, and I think that's why, like, the people who are looking for this clean 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, so when was this? Well, when was this? What equals this? What equals that? And you're like, well, I can't show you everything specifically and relate to what Josephus wrote about the stuff in Jerusalem. But overall, like, yeah, when you tie it in, we were talking about 536, 18 months of darkness. Like, it sounds like the pale horse was out and about when 50 million people are dying of the plague.
Yeah.
All of those things where, I mean, was it really year 536. Well, I mean, that's the best we have to go on. I don't know how close it was to 70 AD, but what I'm saying is I don't think that it has to be right on top of 70 AD in order for it to be fulfillment of the Book of Revelation.
No, I think time's in God's hands. Jesus could have took his time to establish his kingdom. Well, it didn't have to happen immediately, you know.
Well, you know, it's interesting again that the verse that always gets used against like the things we say about, well, Jesus says he's coming soon. Well, a day's 1,000 years to the Lord. Well, he could have been doing his thing over the course of a certain amount of time, and if a day is 1,000 years, well then there's your one day, right? Yeah. Except for it's not a one day to us. Yeah, I don't know. It's just I guess it's just food for thought, especially for people who try to pin us down to like, oh well, this didn't happen when this happened.
We can use their tactics against them if they want to say, oh, you know, well, a day is 1,000 years to the Lord, so the millennial kingdom is 100 million. You know, it's an endless thing. It's kind of like, okay, well, you know, if a day is 1,000 years to the Lord, then maybe I said the day of the Lord is a destruction event that lasts 1,000 years. You know, like, well, if you want to get almost, yeah, we can do that, yeah, and maybe I don't know.
The same thing when people say, well, this sure is a long, short season. And you're like, but you think soon means over 2,000 years. You know, like, you're going to say the short season is too long, but you would say when the time is at hand could mean a couple thousand years.
I think people have tried to tell me, oh, a short season means like a few weeks. It's kind of, you know, it's like 3 months or something. A short season is very quick and it's done with quickly. It's like, how is Satan going to deceive the whole world in like a few months? Like that's not going to happen. You know?
I think aren't those the kind of people who are trying to say that it was all fulfilled in the first century? Because I mean, I heard that I never talked to Shelley, and I've only saw a couple of her videos, but people are saying that now she's a full preterist. I guess she believes
look, Shelley is just on a journey of discovery like the rest of us. I've followed her for years, like, and she, you know, she's basically just been studying it out, reading history and finding evidences to show, and she's done the millennial kingdom thing, you know, and she's really gone into preterism, what the belief actually is, what partial preterism is, and right now she's just going through researching what full preterism is. And I think a lot of people have assumed that means she's now a full preterist, but they do.
Okay, so that's what I heard, yeah.
But I don't know. I think fundamentally she's a Christian, you know, who believes in Christ. Yeah. That's what she is.
Oh well, I mean, I'm not at the point to judge or anything at this point. I kind of like figure out how to square that when they're like, okay, so how could everything have happened in the first century if the millennial reign's 1,000 years?
Yeah.
And I think people are like, oh, well, that's symbolic. You're like, but the devils get let out after a certain amount of time. So, like, well, you know, those are those things where the full preterists seem to shift very quickly between literal and allegory.
Well, that's what I seem to know. She tried to explain in her last video, and I think the gist of it is that because it's an eternal kingdom, it's not a physical kingdom that was on earth, it's a kingdom that was in heaven, though the fruits of that heavenly kingdom do manifest on earth, and it's for us now to build the physical kingdom during the time of the millennial reign type of thing. And it's kind of, now it's all come to pass and everything's over. Full preterism, it's all over. You know, the judgment's done. This is the new heaven and earth in a sense. And that eternal kingdom still radiates down to us today, and it's up to us as the body of Christ to make it better here and to establish the eternal kingdom in the physical too. And she's saying like the agenda is for us to give up, and everything is that Christians always have a blessed hope of something to come in the future, so we don't have to do anything. But what she's saying is what full preterism gives us is the ability to know that it's now in our hands to be like Christ on earth and to build something beautiful here by actually being proactive. So it means we should fight against what the schools are saying and doing to our kids and indoctrinating our kids. We should be a Christian voice in the political world. We should still be active. It basically is saying it's a non-defeatist worldview to be a full preterist, because it means we should be involved, you know.
Actually, I've argued for similar things in the little season, because I don't know that the little season is going to be over soon. So I would say that in the same way that, I kind of agree with that. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but you believe the devil's already in the lake of fire? I mean, I think that like you and I are both kind of like I think the demons are pretty active now. I think the devil's pretty active. I mean, I think that, I mean, is it possible that there's other evil entities afterwards that are not in the lake of fire after all the judgments?
Just to play preterist advocate, just here, you know, what if there are bad people around who are trying their best to convince us the devil's still around, who are using technologies to make us have demonic attacks, but really it's just a very clever ruse and manipulation. Just again, I'm just trying to give an answer here that might work based on what we know. We know they have voice-to-head technology and things like this. They can make us have visual hallucinations with frequencies and things. So what if they made a pretty good go at making us believe that demons are still around? Well, what if they're not? What if it's all just hallucinations caused by technology?
I think the one thing I find the one thing about full preterism that I find completely unsatisfying is that heaven and earth are symbolic. Yeah, like a new heaven and a new earth. Because I'm like, oh well, the heaven is the new is that the temple, or is like the earth is the covenant? Like switching between those two things when you're like, okay, so where can you show me in the Bible is that ever used interchangeably about heaven and earth? Mm-hmm. I mean, because that to me it does actually. I think this is why most people, like myself included, didn't subscribe to full preterism, because I was like, yeah, you really kind of are taking away like things that I'm hoping for that are going to be better. Because like if this is the best this place is ever going to get, I would say that's disappointing. Mm-hmm. You know, that's disappointing. And I also believe that based on, I think biblically, I can show you that I think that men, if not influenced by evil entities, are not as evil as this, as mm-hmm. evil as the evil we're seeing. Because I think that Tucker Carlson had a pretty interesting thing to say in that podcast when he was saying there's so many things that are anti-human lately. And he was saying, like, almost by nature, you'd have to say, because it's not from humans. I thought that, I almost clipped that and made a video, but then people are going to say, oh, you're promoting him. But I thought that is actually really succinct to the way he said that, is that, you know, when you have something that's literally trying to, AI is anti-human, transhumanism is anti-human, this kind of trans agenda is anti-human. And I was like, so therefore, logically, it's not from humans.
He was saying, wasn't he, like, there are no other species on Earth that do what we do to ourselves. Like, like suicide, you know? Yeah, it's like other animals don't do the horrible things humanity does to themselves. It's not seen anywhere else. And it's kind of like, is that because something that isn't human is doing it? It's because humans wouldn't do these things, you know?
I think that was a pretty brilliant point. I was like, it just made sense the way he put it. I was like, yeah, that those are instinctively not human actions.
I think he's talking about spiritual stuff, isn't he? Like, there's a spiritual force moving people to do these things. Yeah, I
think the way he set it up was like there's demonic gets almost overused, but he was kind of saying like, well, what else is this? But you have this impulse, and that's why I said, we experienced like, in the group of people I know, there was a suicide at some point. Not somebody who was close to me, but close to people I was close to, and I've always said that is the most demonic action, because I said, if you believe like what we believe, I would never want to go to meet my maker after doing that. So like, if you have a belief in God in some kind of way, I would say that most people would say that that's not an acceptable way to, it's like he's the one who gets to decide these things. But obviously it's also a very selfish action versus like the people who are picking up the pieces that are left behind. And then if you believe in, like we believe, that you're never like that you couldn't be lifted up by God at some point. So to me, it's a demonic influence that would say this is the best way. And
it is exactly that. And I only know that because in my own family, I've had suicide, and I went through in Britain there's a legal process afterwards called an inquest, where you have to get to the bottom of why did this happen, and people are literally put on the stand, interviewed last witnesses, all this type of stuff, to figure out exactly the thought processes that led him to this point, what happened. It's an inquest, and it's a legal closing of the book on that case situation. legally speaking, you know, so we have on record what happened to that person. And, you know, in the inquest after one of my family members had killed themselves, it's you find out that he had become incredibly isolated. He was heavily addicted to drugs, wasn't finding work, was constantly in arguments with his partner, and was hearing voices, people speaking to him in the walls, all these type of things. All these things reported before what happened, you know. Paranoid delusions of voices speaking to him in the walls. Now in hindsight, you know, I wouldn't call that paranoid delusion. I would say that's clearly demonic activity. This is pretty standard boilerplate how it goes down for most people now. I didn't know this then. I was only young at the time, you know. Yeah. But after talking to like Jerry Marzinski and understanding his experience with paranoid schizophrenics, and it's all the same thing, you know, and you realise it's not schizophrenia is not what we think it is, and what drove him to that point of going to a hotel, you know, and hanging himself is he was driven through depression and desperation and quite literal voices to do it as the only feasible option to escape the misery that he found himself in.
Yeah,
you know, and again, this wasn't a religious man. This wasn't somebody who would have even contemplated that as an option or a way out or an escape or a way to be saved. But he was driven through outside forces. I can only describe it to go that way. You know, and it's that's what Tucker was talking about. You know,
it makes perfect sense, and that I mean, I guess maybe somebody who's never really got like that. I always thought, man, if everything got so bad, I'd be one of those guys who just went up to the, you know, the kind of person who went up to the corner for a pack of cigarettes and just never came back. I'd be like, you know, like there's other ways to escape your problems. I mean, I'm not saying running away is good, but I mean like that. I think that instinctively that God has given us a fear of death, because you don't want, like, you know, so why would we ever think that's the best option?
It's not even just do it to yourselves,
because they wouldn't. And I think certain people who shown much love to their families, and like, you know, they wouldn't do anything to harm them, knowing that like, how bad is it going to be for the person who finds that person? Like how much, like, do you really care about, like, especially people with kids and stuff? And you're like, it's demonic. I mean, like I said, it's like we call lots of things demonic, but that is, to me, that is like one of the most demonic things possible. And it's like, it makes it, these are thoughts not coming from here or here. These are coming from outside here.
External influence, definitely. And at the end of the day, I would consider the one who does it to themselves as really a victim.
Oh, definitely.
Fundamentally,
yeah.
So I don't. That's between them and God. I'm not putting judgment on them for making that choice.
No, it's not me. Like I said, I try to say that all the time, and I say, you know what?
Yeah.
It's not up to me who goes to heaven and hell. And I say, I'm not. I don't ever want to sugarcoat it in a way, like I'm not trying to put fear in people, but I say, but you know what? Like, you read the Bible and you take what you believe to be the truth. But I'm saying like that I'm praying that the bar is low, but I'm going to live like the bar is high. you know what I mean? It's like that. I'd rather do a little extra, you know, than ever to think, oh well, everybody's getting it. I don't think
the sad thing is when someone dies young, which he was relatively young. He was about 40 something, I think. That's young, you know, by today's standards.
Yeah.
The funeral is full of people. There's a lot more people at a young person's funeral than there is at an elderly person's funeral, you know. So the church was packed, and you could see the influence this individual had on hundreds of people. Hundreds of people.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And this is the sad thing. He didn't know that. He didn't see that or realize any of that in his time.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that really gets you after the fact, you know. And but the thing is, it's not even just like doing it to yourself is one thing. But there's plenty of stories of like soldiers who in World War One, let's say, shooting over the trenches, you know, they were purposefully missing their shots. They were firing into the air or firing next to the target, because to get a human being to kill another human being is not easy. It goes against everything inside of us to kill another man, you know. And obviously, we were always told in the media all the horror stories of people. It always looks so easy in the films, doesn't it? They're just gunning each other down, you know, and without remorse, and it's just whatever, you know. Like Saving Private Ryan comes to mind, with the storming the beaches and the Germans are just mowing them down with their MG42s, you know, and it's just like not even thinking about it, you know what I mean? It's kind of, but war in reality, I don't think it is that easy for people to kill each other. I really don't, and that's not what we seem to, and that's why PTSD is such a huge thing. People are like shaken at what they've done, you know, afterwards, and they suffer mental degradation as a result of it, and it shakes them to the core because it goes against every human instinct to kill another man, you know.
Did you ever see that movie Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood?
No, I'm not. I don't think I've seen that.
That's actually a really good movie. But yeah, there's like a young guy, and so like Clint Eastwood was like a really bad cowboy or whatever, and he was a drunk. And he quit drinking. He tried to be better than he was. And then in the movie, they have to kind of get revenge on something. And this kind of young, full of piss and vinegar kid is like, they call him the Schofield kid. And he's talking about how tough he is. And he's talking about how many people he killed. And he was full of it. And at one point he had to kill somebody. And that's when he was just like, yeah, it wasn't like what I thought it was. And he's like, they're drinking. And he was just like, I don't think I want to be like you. And he's like, yeah. And that's what Clint Eastwood's saying. It's like, yeah, something about taking a man's life, you know, taking everything he's got and everything he ever will have. And it's like, and you kind of see, like, they actually show you that a lot in the movies. It's like that, even I think Saving Private Ryan shows you that. But I remember in the series Band of Brothers, I think it was Winners. He had to shoot, like, it was like a guy who, like, was a German popped up, and it was like, he kind of called for him to do it, and he didn't do something. Anyways, he shot and killed him. He was one of the first guys. And I knew they kept on showing a flashback in his brain of that. And eventually I think Winners moves into like he gets promoted and he's not in the field anymore. But it's like he remembers that.
Well, this is the thing.
Because it's like you look at and I think probably too, it's like, because you look at the guy he killed and it's like a really young guy. Like looks like he probably killed, you know, a kid kind of.
Well, people tend, I mean, I'm not saying people can't kill. People have the capacity to do that. That's just a problem with humanity and sin in general, you know. But those people with humanity, real children of God, whether they're believers or not, people, you know, they at least feel bad about it afterwards. And at least can't deal with it, and at least have issues.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. And
they can't sleep at night, you know, and it affects them forever until the end, you know, and obviously that's why we have forgiveness through faith and grace with Jesus Christ. Even those people can be saved whether they killed somebody or not, you know, because most people didn't want to do it. It's kind of circumstance put them in the situation where they did. But those people out there who do want to do it, those people out there who like killing people, those people out there who enjoy that process, there's something demonic behind that. That's not human.
It's inhuman.
I want you to get together